Sheriff Daniel Harris had never looked forward to a day off as much as he did this Saturday morning. The sun had just climbed high into the sky, sending bright beams across the quiet neighborhood of Maplewood Lane. His uniform lay folded neatly on the bed, and for the first time in days he did not have to respond to a call or investigate a complaint. Today was for him, and he intended to spend it at his favorite place, his backyard pool. The house sat at the end of the lane, surrounded by tall oak trees and flowering shrubs. Daniel had moved here 5 years ago, drawn by the calm streets, friendly neighbors, and the space to relax after long days at work. He unlocked the patio door, letting the scent of fresh grass and blooming flowers fill the room. The water of his pool sparkled under the sunlight, looking inviting and cool. Daniel smiled and rolled up his sleeves, ready to enjoy a long, peaceful morning. He slipped his feet into the water first, feeling the chill of the pool contrast with the warmth of the summer air. He leaned back on the edge, letting his head tilt to the sun and closing his eyes. For a moment, everything was perfect. The birds chirped cheerfully, a soft breeze rustled through the leaves, and the world seemed miles away from sirens and reports of theft and accidents. But peace never lasted long on Maplewood Lane, from somewhere beyond the white picket fence separating his yard from the neighbors, a voice shouted sharply. Daniel's eyes snapped open. A young boy, no older than 12, was standing near the fence, pointing his finger at Daniel's pool. Behind him, a woman with a perfectly styled hairdo and a tight expression looked over the fence, her arms folded across her chest. "Hey, you're not supposed to be here," the boy shouted, his voice loud enough to echo across Daniel's backyard. Daniel raised an eyebrow and straightened in the pool. Calmly he said, "I live here. This is my pool." His voice was even, but there was a firm edge beneath it. The boy's face scrunched in confusion. He seemed to have been prepared for compliance, expecting Daniel to feel intimidated. "Mom says you're breaking the rules. You have to leave," he demanded, as if saying the words louder would make them true. Daniel laughed quietly to himself. It was a strange mix of frustration and amusement. He had encountered many people in his line of work who assumed authority came from yelling and pointing. He shook his head and said, "I think you should check the property line first. This pool is on my land, not yours." The boy huffed and stomped back a few steps. "You don't understand. Mom will make you leave," he shouted. His tone carried a mix of fear and defiance, the kind only a spoiled child could have when protecting their inflated sense of importance. From behind the boy, the woman stepped closer, her heels clicking sharply against the sidewalk. She leaned over the fence, her face red with irritation. "Daniel, I cannot believe you are behaving like this. You are disturbing the neighborhood. My son told you to leave. You must follow the rules like everyone else." Daniel wiped water from his face and stood upright in the pool. His eyes met hers evenly. "I understand that you are upset, but this is my property. You cannot order me to leave. You may call anyone you like to verify the boundaries, but my presence here is perfectly legal." The woman's lips tightened. She looked ready to argue further. But Daniel's calm confidence seemed to frustrate her more than it intimidated him. She had probably never met a neighbor who would not bow to her demands, a neighbor who had authority beyond the HOA rules she clung to. The boy's voice broke through again. "Mom, he isn't leaving. He's still in the pool." Daniel could see the boy's confusion and growing fear. The child had been raised to believe that power came from shouting, and that any adult would comply immediately. Daniel leaned against the pool's edge and spoke gently but firmly. "Son, I understand that you are only trying to protect your home, but shouting at someone on their own property is not the way to do it. You should learn that rules are meant to help, not to control or scare." The boy opened his mouth to respond but paused. He wasn't sure what to say. His mother's glare did not help him, and the firmness in Daniel's tone made him realize that not everyone would follow his orders. He swallowed nervously. The woman crossed her arms tighter. "Daniel, I will call the HOA immediately. They will ensure you are fined for breaking the rules. You cannot just decide to ignore them." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly, though his smile remained polite. "Please feel free to contact the HOA. I will be happy to review any complaint. I am sure you will find that I have followed all proper procedures. But let me remind you, I also have responsibilities here as part of the community, and I enforce rules fairly. I have nothing to hide." The woman looked taken aback for a moment. She had expected Daniel to apologize or comply quickly. She had not anticipated such calm authority. The boy, still clinging to his mother's side, peeked through the fence nervously. Daniel shook his head slightly, amused by the situation. He returned to leaning against the pool's edge, letting the water support his arms. The sun reflected off the ripples of the water, making it sparkle. He thought about how strange it was that sometimes the hardest confrontations came not from criminals or emergencies, but from neighbors who did not understand boundaries. The woman finally straightened her shoulders and stepped back from the fence. "I will make sure you face consequences for this. You think living here makes you above rules, but it does not." Daniel nodded. "I respect the rules and I follow the law. That is why I am calm. I live here and I have the right to enjoy my home. If the rules ever conflict with the law or property rights, I follow what is legal and fair." The boy stared at him wide-eyed. He had never seen someone speak so confidently without shouting or threatening. He tilted his head and whispered, He's not scared of us?" Daniel smiled faintly. "No, son. Fear does not guide me. Respect guides me. Remember that. One day you will understand that shouting does not make rules stronger." The woman, finally realizing her attempts to intimidate Daniel were failing, muttered something under her breath and walked back toward the house. The boy followed reluctantly, glancing back at Daniel every few steps. Daniel shook his head with a quiet chuckle. He stepped fully into the pool, letting the water surround him once more. The moment of peace returned, though slightly interrupted by the knowledge that the spoiled neighbor family would not give up so easily. He floated on his back for a while, staring at the sky. The clouds moved lazily, and the gentle rustle of leaves reminded him why he had chosen this neighborhood. He had learned long ago that patience and calmness often resolved conflicts faster than anger or shouting. As he climbed out of the pool later, dripping water onto the patio, he thought about how he would handle the next confrontation if it came. He would stay calm, follow the law, and most importantly, protect his home. After all, being a sheriff did not stop at the station. It extended to his life, his property, and his right to enjoy a peaceful summer afternoon. The day stretched ahead of him, warm and bright, and Daniel intended to make the most of it. Whether the spoiled neighbor boy or his mother returned to cause trouble, he would be ready. For now, the pool was his sanctuary, a place where he could breathe, think, and plan, and Daniel knew that by the end of the summer, lessons about respect and fairness would be learned on both sides of the fence. The next morning, the sun rose bright over Maplewood Lane. Sheriff Daniel Harris woke early, stretching his arms and enjoying the calm of his home. After a quick breakfast, he grabbed a towel and a cooler filled with cold drinks. The plan for the day was simple: a long morning at the pool followed by a short walk in the garden. Daniel loved these quiet mornings, a rare chance to enjoy the neighborhood without disturbances or emergencies. As he opened the patio door, he noticed a familiar sight. Across the fence, the boy from yesterday stood again, his arms crossed, holding a tablet tightly. Daniel raised an eyebrow. It seemed the young boy had made it his mission to monitor the pool. "Good morning, sir," Daniel called out, keeping his tone polite. He knew better than to start a confrontation with anger. The boy narrowed his eyes. "You need to leave," he said firmly, holding up the tablet as if it were a shield. "Mom says you are breaking the rules again. You cannot be in the pool during this time." Daniel set the cooler down and smiled gently. "Rules? Which rules are those? I want to make sure I understand correctly." The boy tapped the screen, showing what appeared to be a copy of the HOA regulations. "It says here that no one can swim before 10 in the morning without permission. You are breaking the rule. Mom says you must leave immediately." Daniel took a step closer to the pool edge, leaning slightly against the railing. "I see," he said, scanning the document. "It looks like those rules were made to ensure safety and fairness in the community. I respect that. However, since I am the homeowner, and I have verified the property boundaries with the HOA in the past, I am allowed to use my pool at any time of day." The boy's face flushed red. He seemed frustrated that his authority from home did not carry over into the real world. But Mom says, "Son," Daniel interrupted kindly, "sometimes rules are misunderstood. Your mother is trying to protect the neighborhood, which is good, but trying to force someone off their property is not the right way to handle things. You should speak politely and respectfully, not demand." The boy blinked. He had never heard an adult speak this way to him before. Usually people hurried to obey the instructions his mother gave. He hesitated and muttered, I don't understand." Daniel smiled faintly. "It is simple. Everyone must respect the law, property, and each other. Shouting or using rules to bully does not make them stronger. Respect is stronger than yelling. You will understand this one day. The woman appeared again, walking briskly across the yard to the fence. Her face was tight with anger. Daniel, I cannot believe you continue this behavior. My son has told you repeatedly that you cannot be in the pool at this hour. You are disturbing the peace and ignoring the rules. Daniel looked at her calmly, holding up his hands in a neutral gesture. I understand your concern. I also understand your desire to follow rules. I follow the law and respect the neighborhood. That is why I stay calm. My actions are legal and within my property rights. You cannot force me to leave my own home. The woman's lips pressed tightly together. She had clearly expected compliance. Instead, she was met with calm authority, a reminder that shouting alone could not change reality. The boy whispered, barely audible, Mom, is he really not scared? Daniel's eyes met the boy's over the fence. No, son. I am not scared. I am confident because I know what is right. You will be safe here as long as you follow the rules fairly, but trying to scare others will not help you. You should learn to respect boundaries. The woman, clearly annoyed, crossed her arms. You may think you are above the rules, Daniel, but the HOA will take care of this. I will make sure you are punished. Daniel shook his head slightly. Please do contact the HOA if you wish. I will review any concerns with them. I have nothing to hide, but I hope this becomes an opportunity for you and your son to learn about fairness, respect, and how rules work in a community. The boy seemed confused. He had expected his mother's words to carry more weight. He frowned at the tablet, trying to find another point to use as proof. But the rules say you have to.
You can't.
Mom said. Daniel smiled and spoke calmly. Son, rules are only useful when applied correctly. Misunderstanding them can cause unnecessary arguments. I have followed all regulations and property laws. That is why I am here peacefully in my pool. The woman opened her mouth to respond, but the boy interrupted her, clearly struggling with the realization that yelling and pointing were not enough. Mom, maybe he is right, he said hesitantly. The woman's face turned red with frustration. She had not expected the child to question her judgment. She looked back at Daniel, clearly trying to regain control. Daniel, this is not over. You are making a mistake. I will call the HOA and they will resolve this. Daniel wiped water from his hands and stood fully upright, his voice calm but firm. You may call the HOA. I will cooperate fully. But let me remind you that I am also responsible for enforcing certain community regulations. Everything I do is fair, legal, and documented. You cannot intimidate me into leaving my home. Respect is earned, not demanded. The boy looked at Daniel with wide eyes. Wait, you're the sheriff? He whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes, and that means I enforce the law fairly for everyone, including your mother and you. But it also means I know my rights as a homeowner. You cannot tell me to leave my property. The boy stepped back, clearly intimidated now, but also learning a valuable lesson. Daniel's calm authority was unlike anything he had experienced before. The woman finally straightened, realizing that her strategy of intimidation had failed. I will make sure you face consequences, she said, though her voice carried less certainty than before. Daniel smiled faintly. Consequences come from fairness, not fear. I hope you and your son can learn this. That is the best outcome for everyone. After a moment, the woman and her son walked away, muttering under their breath. Daniel watched them leave, feeling a mix of amusement and relief. For now, the pool was quiet, and the summer sun reflected off the water in gentle waves. He climbed fully out of the pool, grabbing a towel to dry himself. He set the cooler by the patio chair and sank into it, feeling the satisfaction of a lesson well taught. He knew the situation was far from over. The spoiled neighbor family would likely return, but he also knew that patience, calm authority, and respect would guide him through whatever came next. Daniel took a long sip of cold water, closing his eyes and listening to the soft sounds of the neighborhood. Children's laughter floated from the other side of the lane, birds sang cheerfully in the trees, and the breeze carried the scent of flowers and freshly cut grass. Life was good, even if the spoiled neighbor boy tried to challenge it. He thought about how strange it was that some of the hardest lessons came not from criminals or emergencies, but from neighbors who did not understand boundaries. He chuckled softly to himself. He had handled many situations in his career, but this was a different kind of challenge, one that required patience and wisdom rather than force. As the morning passed, Daniel focused on enjoying the day. He planned to read a book by the pool and perhaps take a short walk in the garden later. He knew that by keeping calm and showing respect, even difficult neighbors could eventually understand the right way to behave. By midday, the neighborhood seemed quiet again. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching the sunlight dance on the surface of the water. He had faced the spoiled boy and his mother without raising his voice. He had upheld the law, his rights, and the values he believed in, and most importantly, he had taught a lesson about respect, authority, and fairness that would not be forgotten soon. The summer had only just begun, and Daniel knew there would be more challenges. But for now, the pool was his sanctuary. The water was cool and refreshing, the sun was warm, and Maplewood Lane was peaceful once more. The next few days passed quietly at Maplewood Lane, or at least Daniel hoped they would. Sheriff Daniel Harris spent his mornings enjoying the pool and tending to the small garden beside his house. He appreciated the warmth of the summer sun and the gentle sounds of the neighborhood. The birds sang cheerfully, and the scent of fresh grass mixed with the smell of blooming flowers. For a while, it seemed like life had returned to peaceful normalcy, but peace on Maplewood Lane never lasted long. One afternoon, as Daniel stepped out of his house carrying a cold drink, he noticed the boy from across the fence again. This time, the boy had set up a small folding chair near the fence, a tablet in hand and a determined look on his face. Clearly, he intended to monitor the pool for the entire afternoon. Daniel sighed softly, but he refused to let it ruin his day. He placed the drink on the table beside the pool and waved politely. "Good afternoon," he said in his calmest voice. The boy barely acknowledged him. Instead, he pointed at the pool and shouted, "Stop! You cannot swim. Mom said it is not allowed during these hours." Daniel smiled. "Son, I live here and this is my pool. I follow the law and the HOA regulations. You are free to watch, but you cannot tell me to leave." The boy frowned and tapped furiously on his tablet. "Mom says you must. She says you are breaking rules, and if you do not leave, she will make sure you get in trouble." Daniel leaned on the edge of the pool, his voice calm but firm. "I understand your concern, but rules only work when they are applied fairly. I have followed all the proper regulations. Yelling at someone does not change that." The boy's eyes widened. He clearly did not expect Daniel to speak with authority and remain unafraid. His small chest puffed up as he tried to assert dominance, but the effect was weak compared to Daniel's calm confidence. From behind the boy, the woman appeared again. Her steps were sharp, heels clacking against the sidewalk, and her face was red with frustration. "Daniel, this is the last warning. You are disturbing the neighborhood. My son has told you repeatedly to leave. You must follow the rules." Daniel stood up straight, dripping water from his swim trunks. He wiped his hands and looked at the woman with quiet authority. "I understand you are upset, but I am within my rights to be here. You cannot order me off my property. I am happy to answer any questions and show documentation if necessary." The woman's face paled slightly. She had clearly not expected a straightforward, calm response. She had assumed that raising her voice and insisting on rules would force Daniel to leave immediately. It had not worked before, and it was not working now. The boy leaned closer to the fence, whispering, "Mom, maybe he is serious. Maybe he is. Really the sheriff?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes, son. I am the sheriff, and I enforce the law fairly for everyone. I also know my rights as a homeowner. You cannot force me to leave." The woman took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "Daniel, you are being difficult on purpose. You think living here makes you above rules. You are wrong. I will call the HOA and they will handle this immediately." Daniel shook his head calmly. "You are welcome to contact them. I have followed every law and regulation. I am confident that the HOA will find everything in order, but I hope that instead of confrontation, we can find a solution that teaches respect and fairness. That is better for everyone." The boy looked confused. He had never met anyone who spoke with such patience and authority. His usual tactics of shouting, showing rules, and demanding compliance were useless here. He tapped his tablet nervously, unsure of what to do next. After a moment of silence, Daniel leaned back against the poolside and spoke softly, addressing the boy directly. "Son, the world works best when everyone respects each other. Shouting and trying to control others only leads to anger and frustration. You should learn to listen, understand, and speak politely. That is how respect is earned." The boy's mother muttered something under her breath, clearly frustrated that her own child had started to doubt her strategy. The boy hesitated, then finally said, "Mom, maybe he is right. Maybe we are wrong." The woman's face turned red with embarrassment and anger. She had expected her authority to be unquestioned, but now, her son was hesitating, learning his first lesson about respect and fairness. She looked at Daniel, who remained calm and collected, and for the first time realized that intimidation did not work on him. Daniel stepped out of the pool, towel in hand, and spoke to both of them. "It is never too late to learn. You can either continue to argue and cause tension, or you can listen and understand that rules are meant to guide, not punish unfairly. Respect others, and you will be respected in return." The woman opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Daniel's calm and logical words had silenced her. The boy looked at his mother, unsure what to do, and she finally said quietly, We will talk about this at home." Daniel nodded. "That is all I ask. I hope you both understand that fairness and respect are the most important rules of all." For the rest of the afternoon, Daniel enjoyed the pool in peace. He swam slowly, the cool water soothing his muscles and mind. He knew that the confrontation had not fully ended, but he also knew that the first step toward understanding had been made. The boy had learned a small lesson, and the mother had begun to realize that authority alone did not always win. As the sun began to move westward, casting long shadows across the backyard, Daniel dried himself and prepared to leave the pool. He walked toward the garden, checking the plants and trimming a few flowers that had grown too long. He enjoyed the simple work, letting his mind rest on the warmth of the summer day and the quiet success of handling the difficult neighbor calmly. Evening came, and Daniel sat on the patio with a cold drink, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The neighborhood was quiet again, children playing further down the lane and birds settling into the trees. Daniel reflected on the events of the day. Handling confrontations peacefully was not always easy, but it brought better results than anger or force. He knew that the boy and his mother might return the next day, perhaps with renewed attempts to challenge him. But Daniel was prepared. He would remain calm, firm, and respectful, showing that authority comes from fairness and understanding, not fear or intimidation. As night fell, Daniel turned off the patio lights and went inside. The house was quiet and comfortable. He felt satisfied that he had stood his ground without anger and taught a valuable lesson in the process. Sleep came easily, knowing that the first steps of respect and understanding had already been taken in the backyard that afternoon. The summer was only beginning, and Daniel knew more challenges would come. But he felt confident that he could handle them all with calmness, patience, and fairness. Maplewood Lane was his home, and no spoiled neighbor or overbearing parent would take that away. The pool, the garden, and the quiet streets were his sanctuary, and he intended to protect them while teaching lessons of respect to anyone willing to learn. Daniel fell asleep that night thinking about how often life's hardest lessons came from simple, everyday encounters. Not every problem required force or anger. Sometimes a calm voice and clear understanding could achieve what shouting and intimidation never could. The following week, Daniel Harris continued to enjoy the summer in his backyard. He woke early, tended his garden, and spent mornings swimming in his pool. The weather was perfect, and the quiet of Maplewood Lane gave him a rare chance to relax. He thought the previous encounters with the spoiled neighbor boy and his mother were behind him. However, that assumption was about to be tested. One bright morning, as Daniel carried a tray of drinks to the patio, he noticed something unusual. A small group of adults had gathered near the sidewalk outside his home. They were holding clipboards, wearing formal expressions, and talking in low, serious voices. Daniel instantly recognized them. They were members of the Homeowners Association, the HOA board. His first instinct was calm. He placed the tray down and stepped onto the patio. The tallest woman among the group waved politely. "Good morning, Mr. Harris. We are here regarding a complaint filed by Mrs. Bennett." Daniel nodded. "Good morning. I assume this is about the pool. I have nothing to hide, and I am happy to discuss any concerns you may have." A man with gray hair stepped forward. "Yes, we received a complaint that you have been using your pool outside the allowed hours, and that it has caused disturbances. We want to review the situation with you." Daniel gestured for them to sit on the patio chairs. "Please have a seat. I will explain everything. I have followed all regulations and verified property boundaries with the HOA before. Everything I do is within my rights as a homeowner. The board members nodded and opened their notebooks. One of them asked, "Can you show us the specific regulations you follow and confirm the hours you use the pool?" Daniel smiled and took a folder from the table. He carefully went through each page, explaining the HOA rules and how he followed them. He also highlighted the property maps showing the pool's location well within his land. "As you can see," he said, "my pool use has always complied with both HOA rules and local law. I believe the complaint stems from misunderstandings and personal disagreements, not actual violations." The tallest woman, who seemed to be the leader of the board, nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. Mrs. Bennett may have misunderstood the boundaries or misinterpreted the rules. Did she attempt to speak with you directly before filing the complaint?" Daniel paused, thinking about the past week. "Yes, she came several times with her son demanding that I leave the pool. I explained calmly that I am the homeowner and that I follow the rules. I also encouraged respect and fairness, but her son and she continued to escalate the situation." The board members exchanged glances, clearly noting the details. One of them asked, "Did any of her actions cause actual disturbances, noise, or danger to the neighborhood?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I have always kept the noise to a minimum, and my pool area is well maintained. The only issues came from misunderstandings and attempts to intimidate me." The woman leader made notes in her clipboard. "Thank you for explaining. We will need to document this, but from what you have shown us, it seems that you have acted appropriately. Mrs. Bennett may have overstepped by involving her son in attempts to intimidate a neighbor." Daniel nodded politely. "That is my assessment as well. I hope that the HOA will communicate clearly with her and her family, emphasizing respect and fairness. That will prevent future misunderstandings." The board member with gray hair looked thoughtful. "It seems you have handled this situation very calmly, Sheriff Harris. That is commendable. Often disputes escalate when emotions take over, but you maintained respect and authority while following the law." Daniel smiled. "Thank you. I believe calm communication works better than anger. Everyone involved can learn a lesson this way." Another board member asked, "What about her son? Was he involved in any threatening or disruptive behavior?" Daniel shook his head. "No. He was simply repeating what his mother told him and trying to assert authority he did not actually have. I spoke with him calmly, explaining how respect works and how rules should be applied fairly. I believe he has started to understand, though it will take time." The board leader nodded slowly. "It seems clear that you acted responsibly. We will inform Mrs. Bennett that the complaint is unfounded and that she must respect your property and your rights as a homeowner. Additionally, involving her son in attempts to intimidate a neighbor is inappropriate." Daniel felt a sense of relief. The situation had reached a point where fairness would prevail. "I appreciate that. I hope this also teaches her and her son the importance of respect and understanding in a neighborhood community." The board members stood, gathering their clipboards. "We will handle this carefully and ensure everyone understands the rules and their responsibilities." "Thank you for your cooperation and patience, Mr. Harris." Daniel waved politely. "Thank you. I am happy to help. I want Maplewood Lane to remain a friendly, peaceful community for everyone." As the HOA members walked away, Daniel stepped back into his backyard, taking a deep breath of the summer air. He looked at the pool, its water glistening in the sunlight, and felt a renewed sense of calm. The confrontation with Mrs. Bennett and her son had been challenging, but justice and fairness had prevailed. Later that afternoon, Daniel prepared to enjoy a quiet swim. As he approached the pool, he noticed movement near the fence. The boy was there again, standing with his mother beside him. Daniel's first instinct was patience. He knew this confrontation could arise, and he intended to handle it calmly. "Good afternoon," Daniel called politely. "How are you today?" The boy hesitated, then said quietly, "Mom, the HOA said we are wrong. They said the rules were not broken." The woman's face was tight with embarrassment and frustration. She looked at Daniel, clearly realizing she had lost the argument. Daniel smiled gently. "Yes, the HOA reviewed everything carefully. I have followed all rules and I respect the neighborhood." The boy shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know. I thought we were right." Daniel nodded. "It is okay. The important thing is that you learn from this. Respect others and follow rules fairly. That is how you earn trust and avoid conflict." The woman muttered under her breath, then turned and walked away with her son. Daniel watched them leave, knowing that this was a turning point. They had been taught a valuable lesson, even if they did not fully realize it yet. With the confrontation finally behind him, Daniel stepped into the pool. The water was cool and refreshing, and the sunlight reflected across its surface. He floated on his back, letting the summer warmth surround him. The lesson of the past days came into focus. Calm authority, fairness, and patience could resolve conflicts better than anger or intimidation. As the day progressed, Daniel enjoyed the pool in peace, reading a book and sipping cold water. The neighborhood seemed calm once more. He could hear children playing further down the lane, birds singing in the trees, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. The conflict with Mrs. Bennet and her son had been resolved, at least officially, and Daniel felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. That evening, Daniel prepared a small barbecue, inviting a few neighbors who had supported him during the disputes. He laughed and shared stories while enjoying good food. The boy and his mother did not appear, but Daniel knew that the lessons they had learned would not be forgotten. Respect and fairness had been demonstrated clearly, and the neighborhood had witnessed the power of calm, patient authority. As night fell, Daniel turned off the lights on the patio and stepped inside his home. He felt proud of the way he had handled the situation. The HOA had verified his actions, the spoiled neighbor boy had learned a lesson about respect, and his own calm had preserved the peace of Maplewood Lane. The summer continued, warm and bright, and Daniel knew that he had successfully protected his home and his rights. He could finally enjoy the quiet of the season, confident that fairness and patience had triumphed. Maplewood Lane was peaceful once again, and Daniel felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that the most important lessons often came from standing firm with calm authority and understanding. The days after the HOA had visited brought a new sense of calm to Maplewood Lane. Sheriff Daniel Harris finally felt that the neighborhood could return to its quiet, peaceful routine. He woke early one morning, stretched his arms, and walked out to the patio. The sun was bright, and the birds sang as if celebrating a fresh start. Daniel smiled, knowing the past week's challenges had been resolved peacefully. As he approached the pool, he noticed movement near the fence. This time it was not shouting or pointing. The boy and his mother stood quietly, at a respectful distance. Daniel waved politely. "Good morning," he said calmly. The boy hesitated, then stepped forward slightly. "Good morning, Mr. Harris," he said quietly. I wanted to say I am sorry for how I acted before." Daniel raised an eyebrow, pleasantly surprised. "I appreciate that. Apologies are important, but what matters more is that you understand why respect and fairness are important." The boy nodded slowly. "I think I understand now. Rules are not just for controlling others. They are for everyone to follow. I will try to behave better." Daniel smiled. "That is good to hear. Learning from mistakes is how we grow. Respect others, follow the rules fairly, and you will be respected in return." The woman, the boy's mother, finally spoke, her voice quiet and reflective. "Daniel, I realize I was wrong to involve my son and to try to intimidate you. I apologize for my actions." Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you. Apologies are meaningful, and it is never too late to start respecting others. Maplewood Lane works best when everyone is considerate and fair." For the first time in weeks, the air felt genuinely calm. The spoiled neighbor boy did not try to assert authority or argue. He had witnessed fairness and authority in action, and was learning that power comes from understanding, not shouting. That afternoon, Daniel prepared for a small barbecue in his backyard. He invited neighbors who had been supportive during the recent disputes. The smell of grilled food filled the air, and the sounds of laughter and conversation spread across the patio. Daniel enjoyed seeing the children play near the pool, their laughter free of tension. The spoiled neighbor boy approached hesitantly, holding a plate with food. "May I join?" he asked quietly. Daniel smiled warmly. "Of course, you are welcome. Just remember, this is a place for friendship and respect. Everyone is welcome if they behave kindly." The boy nodded, a shy smile forming. His mother stayed nearby, watching with careful attention. She had learned that respect and calm authority mattered far more than her previous attempts to control the situation. As the afternoon passed, the boy and his friends began to play near the pool, supervised by Daniel. He made sure they understood safety rules and encouraged polite behavior. The children learned quickly, and laughter filled the backyard once more. The woman eventually joined, keeping a respectful distance but participating in the small gathering. She offered to help serve food and snacks, showing a willingness to cooperate rather than control. Daniel accepted graciously, understanding that small steps of change were often more important than immediate perfection. By early evening, the sun had started its descent, casting a golden glow across Maplewood Lane. Daniel leaned back in a patio chair, sipping a cold drink and watching the peaceful scene unfold. The boy had learned his first lesson in fairness. His mother had begun to accept limits and respect, and the neighborhood had returned to its quiet, friendly rhythm. Daniel reflected on the past weeks. He had faced challenges not with anger but with patience and calm authority. He had shown that following the law, respecting others, and remaining composed could solve problems more effectively than shouting or intimidation. Lessons had been learned quietly but firmly. The boy approached him again, this time confidently. "Mr. Harris, thank you for teaching me how to behave and respect others. I will try to be fair and kind from now on." Daniel smiled, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I am glad you understand. Remember, it is not always easy, but making the right choices is always worth it. Respect is earned through actions, not words alone." The woman watched silently, nodding slightly. She had learned her own lesson about pride, authority, and patience. Daniel had shown her that fairness and calmness carried far more weight than attempts at control. As the sky darkened, Daniel guided the children to leave the pool safely. He reminded them of the rules one more time, emphasizing kindness, cooperation, and safety. The boy listened carefully, taking every word seriously. He had learned that true authority comes with responsibility, and that respect was something to be practiced, not demanded. Later that night, the neighborhood was quiet. Daniel sat on his patio with a cup of tea, listening to the faint sounds of crickets and the rustle of leaves. The challenges of the past days seemed far away, replaced by a sense of peace and satisfaction. Maplewood Lane had returned to its friendly rhythm, and the lessons learned were likely to have lasting effects. He thought about the importance of patience, calm authority, and fairness. Conflicts often arise from misunderstanding, pride, or the desire to control others. By remaining calm and explaining things clearly, he had not only protected his home, but had taught lessons that would resonate with both the boy and his mother. Daniel smiled, feeling the warmth of accomplishment. The summer was still young, and he planned to enjoy the quiet days ahead. Friends and neighbors laughed near the pool, children played safely, and the neighborhood thrived under a shared understanding of respect and cooperation. The spoiled neighbor boy had transformed. He had started to see that shouting and trying to control others would not win respect. Instead, he learned that listening, understanding, and acting fairly were the true paths to authority and friendship. The boy's mother had also begun to realize that respect could not be forced, and that calm authority and fairness carried more weight than anger and impatience. Daniel knew that the future could still bring challenges, but he felt confident. By standing firm with fairness and patience, he had demonstrated the importance of respect and proper conduct. Maplewood Lane was safe, friendly, and calm once more, and he could enjoy his home and community fully. As the night deepened, Daniel finally went inside, closing the patio door behind him, and he looked out at the pool, now calm and reflecting the moonlight. The lessons of the past week seemed clear. Respect, fairness, and patience were the keys to resolving conflicts, even with difficult neighbors. By teaching these lessons, he had restored peace not only for himself but for the entire community. The boy and his mother would remember this summer for a long time. They had been guided to understand that kindness, respect, and fairness were more powerful than shouting, intimidation, or impatience. The pool, once a source of conflict, had become a place of learning, friendship, and trust. Daniel lay down that night with a sense of contentment. His home was peaceful, the neighborhood harmonious, and the summer ahead promised relaxation, laughter, and calm days. Maplewood Lane had returned to its friendly rhythm, and he knew that the lessons he had taught, through calm authority, patience, and fairness, would endure far longer than the summer sun. In the end, the spoiled boy had learned his first lesson in respect. His mother had learned hers in humility, and Daniel had proven that true authority comes not from anger or threats but from calmness, patience, and understanding. Maplewood Lane remained a neighborhood where peace and fairness thrived, and the sheriff could finally enjoy his pool in complete calm, confident that respect and harmony had been restored.